Have you ever encountered a thing, a hobby that you'd love to try and have fun with, but for some weird reason you're unable to do so? For me, it's music. Reason? It's basically math making sounds. Like, come on, what in the D&D spell components is that? I've watched a ton of different music analysis, hoping I finally understand, and every time it was starting with the concept of the motive and ending with that. But since music is everywhere, just like math, I really wanted to make a video about it, so I called the stars for help. And the stars indeed responded. Please welcome today's guest, star cluster shining all the way from Argentina, Lance White. Lance, I need you to know that you are my go-to person when it comes to music, and the only reason I don't bother you more often is that I try not to touch anything strictly musical, otherwise my mind would explode. Anyway, please introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Lance White, or you can just call me Lance. I am a star cluster PNG tuber that comes from Argentina, and I like to yap about stuff. I like to yap about pretty much anything. I also like to play gacha games, and when I'm not doing either of those things, I like to play around with music. I like to just make music. I happen to know a little bit about it, so I put my knowledge to the test, and I make all sorts of silly and sometimes serious stuff too.
How does it happen that you chose to follow the path of math sounds? Music.
I like how you call them math sounds. I don't see them exactly that way, but you're not entirely incorrect, so I get it. As to how I got into it, I don't know. There isn't exactly one definitive answer to this. I've been around music and I've been listening to music and to all kinds of music ever since I was a baby, pretty much. I was just surrounded by a family that happens to have quite a number of musicians. So maybe that was an influence, I guess. And then also I happened to show a little bit of proficiency on it. I used to learn musical concepts and just like little rhythms maybe and little melodies sometimes, and I was able to replicate them quite easily without exactly understanding why or how. So I guess I just naturally had a little bit of an inkling towards it. And so eventually I just grew to being able to make my own stuff after trying and failing a lot. So this is where I am now, and I guess that is the entire path. I just grew into it, sort of, if that makes sense.
A star cluster guru. Very on brand and also very scientifically accurate. What is your favorite way to make music, and what do you like to make the most?
I only really know one way to make music, and that is through my software of choice, who happens to be this little software called FL Studio. But I mean, of course, there's plenty of ways to make music. But in my particular case, I don't happen to play any physical instruments. If you put a piano in front of me, I can play some melodies and some chords individually, but I cannot play the piano properly. I barely know how to hold a guitar. And so I don't really have any other answer to this other than I just, I opened up my software and I just play around with it until something good comes out. That's just how I learned it, I guess. That's just how I developed my way of making music. As for what kinds of music I like to do the most, that's also a difficult question to answer because I don't confine myself to one specific genre. I try to make as much stuff as I can without constricting myself to one specific style of music. I don't think I am the most varied of musicians out there. There's probably other composers and producers that are able to make a lot more genres than I can make, but I kind of want to, you know, try to be that. So I try my best to do all sorts of different kinds of music. Though recently I've been really into making more lo-fi kind of beats, you know, the kind of stuff that you just put in the background of your streams or just relaxing compilations or whatever the heck. I've been really into making that kind of music because it's pretty simple to make, and it just, I don't know, it just sounds nice. I like the end result, and it's quite relaxing to make. So yeah, I guess that would be my favorite at the moment. But again, I try to do anything that I find interesting myself. One day I'll be doing that, and then the other day I'll go and do some chiptune tracks. And then on the other day, I'm gonna maybe do something more inspired by video games, using like video game samples and that kind of stuff. There's really no one thing that I would say is my favorite. It goes in circles sometimes. It just changes every day.
You try a lot of things, but do you have a favorite instrument or mathematical formula? I mean, melody line?
Well, I already mentioned I don't play any instruments like physically, so I don't particularly have a favorite one. Though I do like percussion instruments. If you put like some conga drums in front of me, that's a type of percussion instrument, I can play that, and I actually quite like it. So I physically, I gravitate more towards percussion. I would love to be able to play the drums, for example. That's like my favorite instrument of all time, but I'm not good at it. I'm pretty sure that if I sit behind a drum kit, I could probably do some basic stuff. But I wouldn't say that I'm a drummer or anything like that. But I wish I was. And as for types of melodies, that I'm not entirely sure, but I will say that I happen to take a lot of inspiration from Japanese music, specifically video game music that happens to come from Japan. Some of my favorite video game composers happen to be Japanese composers from like games like Chrono Trigger or Final Fantasy and that kind of stuff. And so the Japanese composers happen to have like a particular way in which they compose melodies. They're like kind of melancholic, but also hopeful. It's like a contrasting type of idea, you know, and they translate that to specific ways in which the melody develops on its own. Like sometimes the melody will go up and it'll sound kind of pretty, but then it also will go down a little bit and it'll sound kind of spooky or maybe kind of sad almost. And so a lot of like Japanese music from video games that I like to listen to and that I gain a lot of inspiration from happen to have that particularity. So I think a lot of the melodies that I myself come up with tend to follow a similar pattern. I'm not sure if this is intentional that it happens or it's because I've listened to so much of this that I just come up with that kind of stuff naturally. But whenever I come up with a melody that I really like, it tends to have the same patterns that I hear in that Japanese video game music that I grew up listening and really like so much. So maybe that.
Very possible. Is making music an easy hobby to get into? How about acquiring everything you need?
Well, nowadays, if you want to make music, starting out is surprisingly easy. Every resource that you might want to have, be it like musical theory resources or how to use specific kinds of software, you can find all of that pretty much for free through Googling or watching YouTube tutorials. Most of what I've learned myself has been like that. I Googled stuff that I didn't understand. I watched a lot of YouTube tutorials or YouTube musicians doing things in their software of choice. And that's how I pretty much got most of the stuff that I myself use when I compose and when I produce. So it's probably the easiest it's ever been to get into music nowadays. It doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, you have to buy a guitar or a piano and you have to learn how to play that instrument. That still works. Of course it does, because, I mean, it's a traditional method. It's not going to stop being useful, but it's not the only way to learn. There are other alternatives that are also very interesting and quite appealing to try out that are maybe even more accessible than going out of your way to buy a very expensive instrument to learn that first.
Yeah, free stuff is the best for learning, forever and always.
Well, yeah, kind of like what I was just saying. A lot of the free resources that you find online are really good to get you started out. You don't have to go out of your way to buy very expensive gear just so that you can learn. You can learn pretty much all the basics and everything that you might need to begin your musical journey for free, completely for free. You can 100% go and buy expensive gear if you really want to, but it's not like completely necessary. You can achieve similar results, especially when learning, for either completely free or maybe even cheaper than it used to be, at least. from my understanding, because I kind of grew up learning everything on the internet. So maybe it didn't used to be this way, but the way I see it now, I kind of see it like this, where if you want to learn, everything is right there. You just need to know how to find it, and you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money to get it.
That's true. But do you need to be able to read the notes or know all that music theory to be able to make music? Are there any things one should know before diving into the hobby?
Well, there's definitely a lot of stuff that is beneficial for you to know before going into making music. But the one thing that is true for me, at least, is that you don't really have to know anything. Because when I started, I really didn't know what I was doing. I was clicking random keys on my keyboard and coming up with stuff until it sounded good. And to a certain extent, I still do it to this day because I cannot read sheet music. I do not know every single scale there is out there. I do not know the intricate relationships between notes and chords and scales and all that kind of stuff. My music theory knowledge is quite limited, and yet I'm still able to make fun stuff and stuff that, to my ears at least, they sound good. So it's not 100% necessary, but I will say that having a better knowledge of stuff like why certain notes work well together and why certain chords go along nicely with certain other chords, and understanding chord progressions and the way notes themselves are, structured, that really helps. Is it 100% necessary? Maybe not. And maybe it's just for me that I was able to get away without knowing all of this stuff, but maybe for someone else, they do need to have a better baseline understanding before going into things. But I think the real answer is that it depends a lot on the person. But it is undeniable that any musical knowledge before going into it, into making actual music, is going to be helpful. You don't have to just go in blind, kind of like how I did it. But in the end, it worked out for me. So maybe I'm not the best example, but yeah, that's just basically it. You can know some stuff or you cannot, and at the end of the day, you can still make good stuff. It's just a matter of, I guess, being enthusiastic enough about it that you want to keep learning and keep making stuff.
For what kind of a person making music would be a nice fit for a new activity to explore?
In reality, I think anyone that listens to music on a regular basis has the capability of learning how to make music themselves. It's just a matter if they're interested about it or not. Like if someone listens to music and they start to wonder how certain things were made in one particular song, or how they got this one specific instrument to sound this one specific way, or what even is that instrument that's doing that funky thing in that one part of the song that I really like. If you have that kind of interest in the music that you listen to, you're probably going to be really interested in the process of making music itself. But really, that's just one step ahead of just listening to music. So if you listen to music, you can absolutely probably make music.
I would argue, but only because I really cannot. But maybe it works for others. Thank you for all those tips. Please tell everyone where they can find you.
Well, you can find me on everything. No, you can find me on Twitter as Lance White, or on YouTube as Lance White, or on Twitch as Lance White. I multi-stream both on YouTube and on Twitch, and sometimes you'll catch me making music if that is what interests you. But also, a lot of the times, I'm just playing some chill gacha games, or just whatever that comes to mind. I like to yap a lot in my streams. So if that kind of sounds like your vibe, you can come hang, and I'd greatly appreciate it. And thank you so much for giving me the space to talk about this kind of stuff. I really appreciate it. I don't usually get to, do this kind of stuff, so that was very fun. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you for that talk. It was super nice to talk about something I know nothing about. And so the first collab video ends. I can't promise I'll ever make music myself. For someone who was only playing on the phone keyboard, that ship has sailed long ago. But maybe some of you might consider trying. To those I say, good luck and have fun. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.